On December 4, 1872, the British brigantine Dei Gratia was cutting through the waves of the North Atlantic when Captain David Morehouse spotted a ship drifting strangely across the horizon. It moved with no direction, its sails loose, almost breathing with the wind. The vessel appeared damaged, but not destroyed. As the Dei Gratia approached, the name came into view. Mary Celeste. Captain Morehouse froze. He knew that name. The Mary Celeste had left New York 8 days before his own ship. In theory, it should have been far ahead of them. Yet here it was, wandering like a ghost. The oddest detail was the silence. No one on deck, no one at the helm, no signals for help. Just a lonely ship drifting in open water. Morehouse ordered a boarding party. When his men boarded, they found something even more disturbing. The ship was perfectly seaworthy. No sign of disaster, no blood, no bodies. But the crew, a captain, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and 7 experienced sailors, were simply gone. The Mary Celeste had become the most infamous ghost ship in maritime history. The Mary Celeste had been under the command of Captain Benjamin Briggs, a highly respected sailor with an impeccable record. He was a cautious navigator, never reckless, never careless. On board with him was his wife, Sarah Briggs, and their young daughter, Sophia. They were traveling to Genoa, Italy, where Briggs intended to take a break from sailing after years at sea. Diary entries recovered on the ship revealed a peaceful journey. Sarah wrote about the calm ocean during sunrise, about Sophia giggling at the creaking sounds of the wooden deck, and about Briggs's pride in the ship's accuracy and speed. Nothing in their writings hinted at fear or danger. Yet the ship was found with its lifeboat missing, and the entire crew vanished without leaving a single clue. Authorities who later studied the logs confirmed the last diary entry was written just 9 days before the ship was discovered. So what happened in those 9 days? Who or what forced Captain Briggs, one of the strictest captains at sea, to abandon a perfectly functional vessel over 600 kilometers from land? The story only grew stranger as investigators examined the ship more closely. When the boarding party searched the captain's cabin, they expected chaos, torn maps, broken compasses, smashed furniture. Instead, everything was in perfect order. Briggs's sword lay untouched. His clothes were neatly folded. Sarah's belongings were still packed. Even Sophia's small blanket rested on the bed. The cargo, 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, was intact except for 9 barrels that appeared empty. But there was no sign of leakage. The kitchen showed signs of recent use. Bread still fresh. A kettle slightly warm, as if someone had boiled water hours before disappearing. But then came the strangest find. The ship's logs stopped abruptly. The last entry read, "All well." No distress call, no note of fear, nothing. The lifeboat davits suggested the boat had been lowered carefully, not in a panic. So why would the crew calmly leave a seaworthy ship, in good weather, with ample food and water? The Mary Celeste was not a wreck. It was not sinking. It was not damaged. It was as if the crew simply climbed into the lifeboat and vanished into the endless Atlantic. Investigators later reconstructed the ship's route using sea charts and log positions. The Mary Celeste had been drifting aimlessly for at least a week before the Dei Gratia found it. But what confused experts was the precise location. The ship was in an open, heavily trafficked area, yet no vessel reported seeing a lifeboat or survivors. No overturned boat, no floating debris, no bodies. It was as if the Atlantic had swallowed all 9 people without leaving a trace. Experts considered weather reports from that week. No major storms, no rogue waves recorded. The ocean had been calm. So why abandon ship? Some believed a waterspout might have scared the crew into thinking the ship was sinking. But the hull was dry. The bilge pumps hadn't been used. Others suggested an error in navigation, but Briggs was too experienced for that. Whatever happened, it forced an entire crew to make a life-or-death decision that made absolutely no sense from a sailor's perspective. And the biggest question remained: why didn't they return after seeing the Mary Celeste survive perfectly on its own? When the ship finally reached Gibraltar, investigators launched one of the most thorough maritime inspections of the 19th century. The first scientific theory blamed alcohol fumes. 9 barrels were empty, but not broken, meaning they were likely filled with methanol, which can seep through porous American oak. Experts proposed that Briggs smelled the fumes, feared an explosion, and ordered an evacuation into the lifeboat until the cargo calmed. But this theory had problems. There were no burn marks. The barrels weren't hot. No signs of smoke. And even if Briggs had evacuated temporarily, he would have tied a rope from the lifeboat to the ship, as was standard practice. But no rope was found. Another theory suggested the ship had taken on water, but the bilges showed barely 3 feet, normal for a wooden ship of that size. Briggs was too seasoned to abandon ship for that. Scientists were left without answers. The Mary Celeste had become a puzzle even modern maritime experts couldn't solve. The next wave of theories came from newspapers hungry for scandal. They suggested the crew mutinied, killed Briggs and his family, then sailed away. But this theory fell apart instantly. First, there was no blood on board, no signs of violence, no missing weapons. Second, the crew had no motive. They were loyal, well-paid, and personally selected by Briggs. Third, if a mutiny occurred, why abandon a perfectly good ship? Why not keep it and its valuable cargo? A British inspector famously wrote, "There is not a single indication of foul play on this vessel." Even today, historians reject the mutiny theory entirely. It simply doesn't match the physical evidence. The ship was left in too peaceful a state, like a home suddenly emptied of its occupants, not a crime scene. The mystery deepened. Pirates were a common danger in many parts of the world during the 19th century, so investigators explored that possibility too. But the idea was quickly dismissed. Pirates leave chaos, broken doors, stolen valuables, missing cargo. Yet the Mary Celeste had all its cargo, even valuable instruments like sextants and chronometers. Sarah Briggs's jewelry remained untouched. Pirates would never take 9 people and leave the treasure behind. Furthermore, the North Atlantic in 1872 was not known for pirate activity. And if pirates had attacked, the crew's belongings would be scattered or stolen. But everything was orderly. Too orderly. Like a family leaving a home for a walk, expecting to return. Whatever happened, it didn't involve greed, violence, or fear-driven looting. It involved something else entirely. One maritime engineer proposed that the ship's main hatch was found slightly open, suggesting the crew may have feared the ship was sinking. Briggs might have worried that the hold was flooding, but when investigators measured the water level inside, it was minimal, barely enough to wet the boots of a sailor. The pumps were not clogged. The ship wasn't listing. It was virtually impossible for Briggs to believe the ship was sinking. Still, some believe the sound of shifting cargo or a sudden wave hitting the hold may have created a false impression of danger. However, this still doesn't explain why the crew never returned. If they left temporarily, they would have stayed nearby. Instead, the lifeboat vanished completely. A disappearance more mysterious than the deserted ship itself. It was as if the ocean didn't just drown them, but erased them. Another theory emerged from meteorologists. A waterspout, an ocean tornado, might have created fear. Waterspouts can suck water into the air, create a roaring sound, and cause sudden pressure changes. If a waterspout approached the Mary Celeste, Briggs might have feared the ship would be split or overturned. But waterspouts always leave evidence: damaged sails, shattered glass, scratched deck. Yet the Mary Celeste was pristine. Not a single sign of violent weather touched the ship that week. The ship was found in conditions so calm that investigators noted the deck appeared as if it had been cleaned that very morning. If a weather event occurred, it must have been something unknown to science in 1872. Or something unrecorded in maritime history. As newspapers sensationalized the case, supernatural theories exploded across Europe and America. Some claimed sea monsters dragged the crew overboard. Others claimed a curse followed the ship after a previous fire damaged it in 1867. One Boston newspaper even suggested a phantom hand rose from the ocean and snatched the crew. Sailors, known for superstition, passed rumors that a ghostly fog surrounded the ship, that strange lights were seen above its mast, that the crew heard voices calling from the water. None of these claims were ever proven, yet they fed the legend of the Mary Celeste. Even Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, wrote a fictional story about the ship, exaggerating the mystery and making it world-famous. But folklore did not solve the case. Reality was still stranger. 9 people vanished from a perfectly safe ship, without a single scream or struggle. The lifeboat was the key. It was gone, lowered in a calm, orderly fashion. This meant the crew left willingly, but not in panic. If the crew escaped in the lifeboat, where did they go? Why didn't they return? Lifeboats of the era could not survive long distances in open ocean, especially with 9 people. Investigators searched the Atlantic coastlines for weeks. Nothing washed ashore. No wood fragments, no ropes, no oars. It was as though the lifeboat never touched the water or was swallowed whole. Modern experts suggest one chilling possibility. If the tow rope snapped due to wind, the lifeboat could have drifted faster than the Mary Celeste, leaving the crew helpless as the ship sailed ahead without them. Imagine Briggs watching his ship disappear over the horizon, leaving them trapped in a small boat in the endless ocean. This is the most accepted theory today. But it still doesn't explain why the rope wasn't found on board. The Mary Celeste did not retire after the incident. Instead, it continued to sail for another 12 years. But every captain who commanded her met misfortune. One was injured so severely he could never sail again. Another abandoned the ship after claiming it whispered at night. Others reported strange sounds, like footsteps, when the deck was empty. Finally, in 1885, the ship's last captain intentionally wrecked it on a reef for insurance fraud. Even then, sailors refused to approach the wreck, calling it the cursed hull. The Mary Celeste ended her days rotting beneath the waves of Haiti, yet the mystery of her crew remained untouched. A ship may die, but a disappearance like this never does. Today, the disappearance of the Mary Celeste is still one of the greatest maritime mysteries of all time. No bodies were found, no lifeboat, no final message, just a ship wandering the Atlantic, alone. Modern historians still debate the cause. A freak wave? Alcohol fumes? Human error? Something science has yet to understand. The truth lies somewhere beneath the waves, lost forever. All that remains is a haunting fact. The Mary Celeste was found completely intact, fully supplied, and ready to sail. Its crew, a family, and 7 sailors simply vanished from history. And the Atlantic, an ocean that has swallowed countless secrets, kept this one for itself. More than 150 years later, the world still asks the same question. What really happened aboard the Mary Celeste? Perhaps the ocean will never tell.